Hey everyone! Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how global our community is. Now, let's get started. The first time I saw someone standing in the exact center of our cul-de-sac, it was 1:15 in the morning and they were facing only my house. Sprinklers hissed in the dark, the air smelled like wet concrete, and our porch light buzzed and flickered like it was scared to stay on. I know how that sounds, but that night I honestly wasn't sure I was the one living inside the house anymore, that I had moved there for peace. Quiet suburb, dead-end street, matching mailboxes, all of it. After a rough year, I just wanted somewhere my younger sister could sleep without sirens outside her window. I worked night shifts from home, kept odd hours, and told myself this cul-de-sac was safe because nothing ever really happens on streets like ours. Right? The first sign it wasn't as safe as it looked came from my phone. At 1:12 a.m., my doorbell app buzzed. Face detected. Driveway. I opened the live view and got a smear of static across the middle of the street, like someone had dragged a magnet across the footage. When I stepped outside, the air was colder and our brand new porch bulb was already flickering. That was when I noticed the faint white chalk ring drawn in a perfect circle in the center of the cul-de-sac. Kids, I thought. Some game. But Mr. Howard, the elderly neighbor across from me, was standing in his doorway just watching the circle. "Don't step in the middle after one," he called, almost sing-song, then chuckled like it was a joke. I laughed it off too, went back inside. But my sister's bedroom window faced that ring and the dog next door was growling at it like there was something sitting right in the center that I couldn't see. The next night, the app buzzed again. Face detected, street. The live feed showed the same static smear, closer to my driveway this time. When I peered through the curtain, I saw a tall shape by the mailboxes, only a darker patch among shadows. A second later, the teen from 3 houses down slipped out in a hoodie, lighting a cigarette, and for a moment I relaxed. Maybe he was the one messing around. But if it was just him, why had the dog started whining before he even came outside? I did what you're not supposed to do if you want to stay normal here. I posted in the cul-de-sac group chat about a possible prowler. Replies trickled in. "It's just kids. Log off and sleep." Laughing emojis. My reputation started to tilt toward paranoid neighbor. That night, I drew a thin chalk line at the edge of my driveway, right where the street began. If something was getting closer, I wanted proof. Around 1:15, I heard next door's dog whine. Then a sharp yelp cut off mid-breath. On playback, its collar jingled in a perfect circle around the middle of the cul-de-sac, but no hand, no leash, nothing was making it move up. By the third night, I had a pattern. Every alert hit between 1:10 and 1:20 a.m. Each one labeled face detected, a little closer to my house. That evening, I had to work late from the office, so my sister was alone at home. I watched the cameras on my phone like a maniac, staring at the driveway chalk line. At 1:14, static shimmered right at that line, like someone unseen had towed the border. A second later, my sister's bedroom light clicked off on its own while the app calmly notified me. Face detected. Porch. Calling the neighbors didn't help. They had already decided I was dramatic. Nobody answered my texts. Nobody picked up my calls. Even the Wi-Fi at home glitched. The router kept resetting on the feed. All I had was that flickering porch light in the video, buzzing like a trapped insect. I ended up banging on Mr. Howard's door the next evening, just before midnight. Desperate enough to look crazy on purpose if it meant someone listened. He listened. Too closely. "There's something in the middle," he said, eyes on the chalk circle, not on me. "It's older than this street. We keep it there. Long as the circle stays unbroken and it never reaches a porch. Nobody has to trade places." He looked at me and added, "That's why you never step in the middle after one." He sounded absolutely unhinged. Like this was all some story he told himself to stay important. But the way his gaze pinned that chalk ring made my skin crawl. The next night, the app buzzed again. Face detected. porch. My heart slammed, so hard it felt like it shook the phone in my hand. Without thinking, I ran out the front door barefoot. The sprinklers sprayed my ankles. The streetlight painted everything a sick pale blue. I charged straight through the chalk circle and kicked at it, grinding white dust under my heel, yelling, "Come on! Then, show yourself if you're real." That was the moment nothing could be undone. The porch light popped with a soft crack and went dark. The streetlight above the ruined circle flared brighter, washing the pavement in harsh light. My phone switched views on its own, jumping to the driveway camera. On screen, in a grainy black and white image, I saw myself standing in the exact center of the cul-de-sac, head tilted up toward my own house. At the same time, I heard the front door slam upstairs and my own voice calling my sister's name from inside. For a moment, I didn't know which version of me was the real one and which was just something that had finally reached the porch. People only believed me later because of the footage. They watched it over and over in slow motion. Me in the circle, unmoving, while another me walked through the house like it belonged there. Neighbors say it was a glitch, some kind of looped frame. The one telling this story sits inside, under a steady light, acting like nothing is wrong. But sometimes, mid-sentence, I still feel the cold spray of sprinklers around my ankles and see our porch light flicker from the wrong side of the glass. My first HOA violation letter didn't threaten money. It warned me not to turn on my backyard lights after 11. The paper was a deep red, damp around the edges, and smelled faintly like pond water. Outside, sprinklers hissed in the dark, and in between that steady spray, I heard something else, a slower sound, like something breathing between the houses. I thought it was a joke, until I realized no one else was laughing that I had just bought the place. My first real home, my escape from landlords, roommates, and thin walls. I grew up being told what I could touch, when I could sleep, how loud I could be. So when I moved into this quiet, perfect suburb, I promised myself one thing. Nobody was going to control me again, especially not some board of neighbors with clipboards and measuring tapes. No matter how normal the street looked from the outside, the second letter came before I met a single neighbor. It was taped to my garage, perfectly centered. Grass must be maintained at exactly 2 inches in height, measured from edge of foundation. Exactly, 2 inches, all around. I walked the street that afternoon and saw it. The ring of perfect lawns, identical lines hugging each house like a radius from the foundation. When I looked back at my own patchy, uneven grass, the sprinklers kicked on, and that second sound, the breathing, slipped under the hiss again. The HOA president introduced herself that evening. Polo shirt, clipboard, a smile that did not touch her eyes. "We keep things looking normal here," she said, like it was a blessing. She pointed out the curtains rule next. Every front window had to have light. White curtains, visible from the street, so the houses presented a unified front. Behind her, at the very end of the street, one house sat completely unlit. Windows darker than the sky, like empty eye sockets. "That one's pending renovation," she said quickly when she saw me staring. The handbook showed up next in my mailbox. Between fines and trash days, there was a tiny line most people would miss. Residents must not use the side path adjacent to Lot 12 after dark. Lot 12 was the unlit house. Another rule said no backyard lights after 11, under any circumstances. The first time I ignored that, just to see what would happen, the sprinklers clicked off at exactly 11:01. The breathing didn't. When I went back inside, a red notice was waiting on my kitchen table, edges wet, and every door locked. I asked a neighbor about it the next day. He froze like a deer in headlights, then forced a smile. "Rules keep the neighborhood safe," he said. Safe from what? He didn't answer. That night, my security camera glitched every time I pointed it at the unlit house. The red violation for curtains non-compliant slid halfway under my bedroom door from the inside. I hadn't given anyone a key. If you've ever felt your own home decide you're the outsider, you know that cold, sinking feeling that be why the third week. I was one notice away from a non-compliance review. Deadline printed in bold, 11 p.m. If I didn't cut my lawn to exactly 2 inches, hang white curtains, and keep my backyard dark, they threatened fines, legal action, even a lien on the house. I cornered the president in her driveway, my hands shaking. Why does it matter this much? I asked. Her smile finally cracked. Because we already lost one cul-de-sac, she said softly. We keep things looking normal so it can't recognize who lives here. She told me just enough to make it worse. There had been another street, before mine, same layout, same perfect lawns. Someone decided they were above the rules, she said. They lit up the woods. It saw every face, remembered every shape. The next morning, every house was still there, but no one inside belonged anymore. It sounded insane, like a cult story to scare newcomers into obedience. But when the sprinklers came on early that night, and the breathing started before the water, I realized I already half believed her to, yes, oh, I did exactly what you would do if you hate being controlled. I decided to prove them wrong. On the night of my review, I waited until the clock on my stove clicked to 11:01. Then I turned on every backyard light I had, flooding my fence line with harsh white. I kicked at the uneven lawn, shredding the careful pattern I had grudgingly mowed. I started a live stream on my phone, telling anyone watching how insane my HOA was, and dared them to come find me. The other houses went dark, one by one, like someone snuffed them out. Not a single neighbor stepped onto a porch. At the end of the street, the unlit house finally glowed from within, its windows brightening all at once. Silhouettes appeared, tall and still, facing my yard. Out by my fence, something moved behind each panel, just outside the light, tall shapes shifting where sprinklers should have been spraying. Every camera glitched, except the one aimed at my sliding glass door. In that feed, my reflection in the glass lifted its hand before I did. The listing now says I left without notice. The HOA records for my address are perfect, clean, full compliance. New buyers swear they love how normal everything looks. Sometimes, though, at night, a red violation notice still appears on the inside of the bedroom door, damp around the edges, smelling like pond water. And if you look toward the unlit house at the end of a quiet street, you might see a stranger's face in the window, lit by a phone, streaming something no one remembers authorizing. On my street, the last thing that ever moved was the perfect lawn next door. It never had weeds, never had leaves, never even had footprints, not for more than a minute. At midnight, when the rest of the cul-de-sac smelled like damp concrete, that lawn smelled like fresh-cut grass, sweet and sharp. Like someone had just mowed in the dark when no one was looking. I rented the place beside it, the ugly one in every real estate photo. Bare patches, dandelions, dirt like powder. The kind of yard that made you apologize with your eyes whenever a neighbor walked past. My landlord told me if I cleaned it up, he might sell the house to me one day. So yeah, the stakes felt real. If I wanted to stay, I had to make my mess look like everything else on the block. Especially next to that flawless carpet of green. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was because of the delivery guy. He cut straight across the perfect lawn to save a few seconds, heavy boots sinking deep into that soft, dark green. I watched from my window as he walked away, leaving a clear trail of crushed blades behind him. When I looked back a few minutes later, every single footprint was gone. The lawn had smoothed itself back into place like it had never been touched. Old Mr. Duffy across the street saw me staring. Last family kept digging where they shouldn't, he muttered. Moved away overnight. He said it like a joke, but his eyes stayed on the line where my patchy yard met the perfect one, a razor-straight border like someone had cut the earth with a ruler. That night, around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the smell of cut grass drifting through my closed window and a low mechanical hum, like a lawnmower running under the ground. I decided to test it. The next afternoon, I threw a broken stick onto the perfect lawn, right near the property line. It lay there on that velvety green like a stain. An hour later, it had sunk halfway down into the blades, like the grass was swallowing it. By dusk, it was gone. That was when my neighbor finally came out, smiling too wide, wearing gardening gloves that were perfectly clean. "You must be the new renter," he said. "People call him Mark, but he never offered a last name. Your yard's having a rough time." He waved a hand over my patchy grass like a magician about to reveal a trick. "I can help. I treat this whole lawn myself. Free first treatment, no charge. Just sign here so I can apply it on your side too." The consent form on his clipboard already had his signature. The ink smeared a faint green, like he had signed it with stained fingers hours ago that I should have refused. Instead, thinking of the landlord and that promise, I scribbled my name and handed the pen back. The hum in the ground seemed to pulse for a second under my shoes. The next morning, a thin strip of my yard, right along the property line, had transformed overnight. Same color, same height, same eerie perfection as his lawn. When I stepped close, I could feel a vibration through the soles of my feet, like something far below was circling. Each day after that, the strip grew. What started as a few inches deep into my yard became a foot, then two. Other neighbors congratulated me on finally getting serious about maintenance. They touched the grass, smiled, and walked away a little too fast. One evening, I found a half-buried garden trowel at the edge of the line. The wooden handle was swollen and rotted, but the metal blade was spotless, like it had been scrubbed from the inside. When I tried to press my heel into the turf there, it resisted, springing back with a rubbery strength that did not feel like soil. That night, I watched the lawn instead of sleeping. At 3 a.m., the smell of cut grass rolled in again, thick and sweet. Through the blinds, under the moonlight, I saw the surface of my neighbor's lawn heave, just slightly, in slow circles, like something huge was turning over beneath it. The hum rose and fell, tracing the property line, circling the block. I pulled my phone out and tried to record, but the screen showed nothing except a still picture of perfect grass. While my eyes watched it ripple, when I confronted him the next day, Mark did not even pretend to be surprised. "The system is self-feeding," he said. "As long as someone consents, it does not have to look elsewhere. You'd be amazed what it can do to keep the neighborhood beautiful." He said consent, like a legal spell. When I asked about the last family, he just shrugged. They did not want the treatment. The lawn likes balance. It balanced itself. If he had asked for money, I would have believed it was just a scam. But he never mentioned a price, only the word balance. By then, almost all of my yard had turned perfect without me lifting a finger. The landlord praised me in a text, already talking about raising the price if I wanted to buy. Other neighbors gave me pitying looks I did not understand. At night, the hum timed itself with my heartbeat whenever I stood near the door. If you have ever felt your own house lean away from you, like it is siding with the neighborhood, you know the kind of quiet that can drive you crazy. On the night before the big yard of the month inspection, I decided I was done being scared of a lawn. I took a shovel and my phone, stepped over the razor straight line, and planted my weight right in the center of that perfect green. The grass felt oddly warm against my ankles. I hit record and drove the shovel down hard along the property line, cutting into the roots. The first scoop came up dark and wet. Not brown, not crumbly, but almost black, glistening, with a metallic smell that turned my stomach. The hum under my feet roared, racing up my legs, into my bones. The turf around my boots softened, blades curling around my ankles like fingers. I tried to step back, but my heels sank deeper, locked in place. Just below the roots, lit by my phone screen, I saw smooth pale shapes pressed in the soil, rounded like stones but with the faint suggestion of cheeks, of eye sockets, of mouths that had been filled in. On my screen, though, the camera still showed nothing but untouched, perfect grass, not even the shovel in my hands that I do not remember falling. I remember the hum slowing, satisfied, as the ground tightened around my calves and pulled. I remember the smell of cut grass filling my lungs until I could not taste anything else. The next thing the neighbors remember is a "for rent" sign going up again a few weeks later. The lawn out front flawless from sidewalk to porch. Now the street has a shiny yard of the month sign planted in front of what used to be my address. A new couple smiles on the porch, proud of how perfect everything looks. At night, when they lie in bed with the windows closed, sometimes the smell of fresh cut grass leaks into their room all the same. And each morning, if they look carefully, they might notice a new strip of impossibly perfect turf creeping just a little closer to their front steps. In my suburb, the only person who ever walks after midnight never shows up on camera. No headlights, no shadows, no late-night jogger in reflective gear. Just the soft grit of shoes on concrete, slow and steady, looping around the block when every house is dark. If you are asleep, you will never hear it. If you are awake, you might wish you had stayed asleep. I moved there for quiet. I work from home, lots of late nights staring at a screen, so a calm cul-de-sac felt perfect. My roommate sleeps with white noise blasting in his room, knocked out by midnight most nights. I am the light sleeper, the one who wakes if the fridge clicks wrong. I kept telling myself that was why I heard it first, why it chose me first. You can call it paranoia if you want. It started with a digital clock and a number that would not change. The first night, I woke up with that weird feeling that someone had called my name, even though the house was silent. I rolled over, squinting at the red digits on my bedside clock. 3:17 a.m. Then I heard it. Soft, unhurried footsteps on the sidewalk outside. Not running, not shuffling, just a steady, measured walk. A second later, the tiny solar path lights in front of my neighbor's house flicked on, one by one, as if someone was walking past them. I grabbed my phone and checked the doorbell camera. Nothing. Perfectly still street. But the sound kept moving, house to house, like someone counting addresses with their feet. In the morning, I mentioned it in the neighborhood group chat. Someone replied with a laughing emoji and called it Suburban laps. Apparently, there was a running joke about a 3 a.m. runner no one had ever actually seen. Another neighbor said, "You get used to it." When I checked my fitness tracker later, it showed almost 800 steps logged around 3:20, marked as light activity. I had not left my bed. The next night, I stayed awake on purpose. At 3:17, the clock on my nightstand flipped once, then seemed to freeze for a few extra seconds. Then came the steps again, right on cue. Grit on concrete. Heel then toe. Heel then toe. I opened the blinds a crack. Path lights woke up in a clean line on the far side of the circle, house by house, sweeping closer. The sound was clear, but the street was empty. My roommate snored on. The footsteps passed our driveway and moved on, and I lay there listening until they faded. In the morning, one house down the street had a for sale sign out front that had not been there the day before. I thought it was a coincidence until I ran into the old man who walked his dog before sunrise. He was outside the next afternoon, dog pulling at the leash, when I mentioned the steps. His face tightened for just a second. "Never open the door when they stop," he said. Then he laughed like it was a joke, but his dog whined and refused to walk past my gate. That night, the steps came again, and when they reached his house, they paused. Just for a few beats. The next morning, his porch light stayed off. His curtains stayed closed. His car never moved. I started mapping the pattern. The kids on the street drew a chalk hopscotch grid on the sidewalk one day, numbers scattered along the curve of the cul-de-sac. When I looked closer, those numbers matched the house numbers in order of the moves. First 4, then 6, then 8, each one getting a selling sign. A vague message in the chat about moving for work. At night, the footsteps landed on those same numbers in my head like they were counting down. I played my audio recording of the sound for my roommate. All he heard was static and distant hum. My watch, though, logged every night as if I had walked a full loop. The first time the footsteps stopped at my gate, I felt it in my teeth. They came closer than before, the rhythm louder, each step sending a little tremor through the floorboards under my feet. Path lights lit up along the sidewalk in front of my house, one after another, then went dark. The sound halted right at my front walk. I stared through the peephole, holding my breath. No one. Nothing. Just an empty path and a welcome mat. After a long few seconds, the steps started again and moved on. The next morning, the dog walker's house was silent, curtains drawn, TV still flickering through them like someone had walked away mid-show that I found his front door unlocked. Inside, Coffee sat half-drunk on the table. His shoes were by the mat. No bags, no boxes, no sign of moving. In his living room was a notebook full of hand-drawn circles, house numbers, step counts. At the top of every page, he had written the same phrase: houses walked out of. Looking at the dates, I realized something sick. No one had left the neighborhood. The neighborhood had been leaving them. That be why the time I went home, I had convinced myself he had lost it. Sleep deprivation, obsession, seeing patterns that were not there. I told myself I was better than that I could prove there was a simple explanation. So the next night, when the clock slid toward 3 a.m., I did not hide. I stood by the front door with my hand on the knob and waited for the numbers to hit 3:17. When the footsteps reached my welcome mat, I turned the handle and yanked the door open. The air on the porch was too still, too cold, like walking into the silence between beats of a heart. The footsteps did not stop. They walked straight through me. For a second, the sound was inside my ears, my chest, my bones, each step hammering against my ribs. Down the street, the motion lights flicked on in sequence, tracing the usual loop. Inside my house, behind me, lights clicked on in the same pattern, room by room, like someone was walking through it, checking every space. My watch vibrated, step count racing upward though I was standing frozen in place. On my phone, the recording app started playing without me touching it, but the footsteps were not coming from the street anymore. They were coming from inside, circling the walls, pacing the hallway, slowly, steadily, as if finishing the lap in my home. One remembers seeing a moving truck at my address. The listing online just says vacant. Quick possession available. If you drive past, the curtains are open, the rooms look empty, but the porch light is always functional, the path lights always charged. At 3:17 a.m., if you happen to be awake somewhere on that block, you can still watch the motion lights blink on in a perfect circle, like someone is walking their usual midnight route. And if you stand very still inside an empty house and listen, you might hear slow footsteps tracing the outline of rooms that do not belong to anyone anymore. And that was the last story for tonight. A quiet cul-de-sac, a strict HOA, a lawn that never forgets, and footsteps that keep walking long after the houses are empty. On paper, suburbs are supposed to be the safest places you can live. But once you start paying attention to the little rules, the perfect lines, and the sounds that only happen after everyone else is asleep, you notice how easy it would be for something strange to move in without anyone ever admitting it. If you made it this far, listening in the dark with me, thank you. You might want to look out your own window before you go to bed tonight. Check the lawn. Check the lights. Listen for that one sound that does not quite belong. Which of these 4 stories creeped you out the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more late-night suburban horror, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and keep your notifications on. I have plenty more true stories from quiet streets that are anything but